If the hegemon falls, the whole system of interactions between countries will be in question. The UN has compromised itself. The role of a single divider will be vacant for some time, and the states will have to somehow agree among themselves, solve issues and deal with historically accumulated problems. Russia is likely to participate in one way or another in the establishment of new rules of international relations. What do we want these rules to be? Which rules are favorable to us? How will we build relations with the countries that are now pursuing aggressive policies towards Russia? It looks like the key word is going to be responsibility. Especially in a world of expensive resources, issues of fair exchange and accountability for one's choices and actions, and not just one's own, are all the more acute. The age-old question, should children be held accountable for the actions of their fathers? The law says no, but life shows that we live in a world that is largely made up of the choices and actions of our parents. Going to school and making friends in the neighborhood where parents settled, internalizing their parents' values and ways of doing things, choosing education influenced by their parents. In each of these cases it is as if we have a choice, but our acquiescence seems to confirm the choices made by our fathers. Their choices become our choices. It can be said that in reality, children are not directly punished for the actions of their fathers, but bear the burden of the natural consequences of their actions. It makes sense when the elites are responsible for the decisions of the leaders of the state or the chief elitist. Responding with property and sometimes with their heads. In less herbivorous times, critical mistakes, a lost war, a palace coup, or a revolution often resulted in the ruler and his family losing their lives. Judging by the stories of Iraq and Libya, some are keeping the tradition these days. But should the people of the state be held accountable for the choices and actions of their leaders? First of all, he should, because he does. Over all conflicts and wars there is a formidable grief for the vanquished. And folk wisdom such as panfights, Yukolopov, chub cracking, also appeared not on an empty place. Whether the people want it or not, whether they realize it or not, important decisions in the election of leaders place the burden of execution and consequences on the people of the state. Second, we live in a world where most of the participants in international relations are democracies. A weighty part of the people chose their leaders or brought this or that party to power. And in general, the power in the country rests on the expectations and non-resistance of the people. When the French vote for Macron a second time, it means that specifically he and good relations with the globalist West suit them more than they don't. But it wasn't just Macron who lost his African colonies, all the French lost their resource endowment. Perhaps ordinary people do not fully realize it, but the elites understand this point very well and try not to quarrel with the people unnecessarily. If only because the place at the top of the power pyramid is a subject of fierce competition, and if you stumble, there will be competitors who will try to ride and channel the people's anger in order to become the elite themselves. But free will and the ability to choose are privileges that involve consequences and responsibility for one's own decisions. Moreover, the fewer resources, the stronger the decision-responsibility nexus. Choices in a world of scarce resources can be compared to a casino. We bet money with the expectation of profit, but if expectations are not met, we lose our bet. Most Eastern European countries, at the request of the European Union, have handed over weapons to our neighboring country, with which we are in conflict, for war with Russia. In fact, if you strip away the tinsel of words, they weighed their relationship with the hegemon and their relationship with Russia, and chose the former. And it is obvious that for the EU the US was not an existential issue, but for Russia its existence was at stake. Perhaps they felt that punishment, funding cuts or sanctions would fly from the brutal Euro officials. And good Russians will forgive, especially if you say, we were forced. Perhaps the past rogue president or prime minister made this decision and we've already elected a new one, or play the gas for love exchange. And most likely the elites and people of these countries again bet that our neighboring country, with which we have a conflict, will win, and the US will be the winner, and as usual decided to participate in this victory in the subsequent turf. It will be strange when the bet doesn't play out, but everything stays the same. Third, facing the consequences of one's actions promotes reflection, awareness and development. Psychologists say that the best way to raise children is not with a belt and a corner, but with the natural consequences of their actions. You lose your fancy phone, you walk around with a button phone. If you don't want to study, do more housework. In this case, the child will better predict the consequences of their actions and more easily navigate the world around them. After all, real life, unlike many parents, doesn't put you in a corner or punish you with a belt, but boomerangs back the consequences. In general, clear rules and clear cause and effect relationships will make understanding easier, as it is important for a child to know what he or she will be praised for and what he or she will be punished for. Even if the rules are strict, it's better that way than without. Even strict but clear rules are better than the arbitrary rule of a hegemon. Over the long term, People's realized responsibility for the actions of their leaders will allow people to choose more adequate rulers, which will improve international relations in the future. Sure, some will say, rigid rules can lead to us being less loved. Europe has long understood the inferiority complex of our elites and especially intellectuals, and as an experienced abuser used this complex, exchanging its love for real resources. What could Europe's dislike of the worst-case scenario lead to? Will they stop buying our resources, start a military conflict, impose sanctions, give us weapons to kill Russians? That's the way it goes. By the way, all of this hints that perhaps Europe has been put before the fact. Now it will have to dine for real money. You have to accept as a fact, everyone loves only themselves. Moreover, for the West we will always be barbarians, savages, undeservedly owning resources and living space. And if they don't love us, at least let them consider our interests. So, what's it look like? The rules of international relations are likely to be as follows. The decisions of the leaders of the state are the responsibility of the elites, by their property and by the people, by the weight of the overall smeared consequences. Responsibility is not meant as punishment, but as a change in relationship and the need for just and inevitable retribution. First of all, this understanding is important for our neighboring countries. The implementation could be doomed, for example, into a gradation of countries by friendliness with the same gradation of prices for goods and resources. And given that in a world without a single policeman, security will also become an extremely expensive commodity, the degree of friendliness will extend to Russia's intervention or non-intervention in potential conflicts. The number of accumulated historical issues and claims of countries against each other is enormous, which means that there is no shortage of reasons for conflicts. It is quite possible that for some countries, Russia's unfriendly status will automatically turn that state into prey for its neighbors. Also, for the long-term implementation of such rules, it is very important to remember and keep track of real deeds rather than ugly words. Our northern ethic considers an enemy to be someone who is a threat, but we tend to forgive the weak, the poor and those who are not directly threatened now and forget their past deeds. The Soviet Union, for example, generously maintained its western peripheries. The Bulgarians, the Romanians, the Baltics, the peoples of these outskirts tried to kill our ancestors during the world wars. It's wrong. Wrong for themselves or for them. This has led to them being back on the side of the West and again aiding in the destruction of the Russians. In order to remember and pay our bills, it is important that we keep our history safe from opportunistic rewriting. Even if someone is now friends with us and building partnerships, it is important to remember what happened in the past: wars, betrayals and territorial disputes. If only because they remember and herbivore times are ending. A consistent policy of working by the rules and mandatory pay as you go will cause the elites and peoples of neighboring countries to think 3 times before going against Russia's interests. And those rulers who try to carry out an act of overt aggression against our country will be met with a revolt or a palace coup. Oh, and maybe a snuff box. If the rules are clear, transparent and, most importantly, consistently enforced, they will be perceived as fair despite their harshness, i.e. retribution will not be perceived as punishment but as a consequence of one's own mistakes. And in the insecure and harsh world of expensive resources, justice can be the last stand in the raging ocean of unpredictability of tomorrow or the long night. In difficult times, people tend to learn lessons quickly and pass them on to the next generation. As an example, a cage with 5 monkeys in it, a bunch of bananas tied to the ceiling, and a ladder underneath. Hungry, one of the monkeys approached the ladder with the express intention of getting a banana. As soon as she touches the ladder, you open the faucet and hose all the monkeys down with very cold water. A little time passes and another monkey tries to eat a banana. Same action on your part. The third monkey, improving the momentum, tries to get the banana. But the others grab her, not wanting a cold shower. Now remove one monkey from the cage and replace it with a new monkey. She immediately, noticing the bananas, tries to get them. To her horror, she saw the angry faces of the other monkeys attacking her. After the third attempt, she realized she couldn't get the banana. Now remove another of the original 5 monkeys from the cage and start a new one in there. As soon as she tried to get the banana, all the monkeys attacked her, and the one who was replaced first, and even more enthusiastically. And so gradually, replacing all the monkeys, you will come to a situation where there are 5 monkeys in the cage, which were not watered at all, but which will not allow anyone to get a banana. Why? Because that's the way it is here.